and welcome back. After a 1-inch rain and a 4-day hiatus, the ground is finally shaping up to be back in planting condition. It is a tad bit chilly outside right now, and there is a tiny bit of moisture at the top of the ground right now. We are gonna have to wait a little bit this morning for the sun to come out, the wind to blow, hopefully wick away that moisture, and then we should be hitting the ground here in a few hours. We do have a handful of things that we're wanting to check off our list before we get started. So let's go get to work, and don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel if you enjoy what you see. Our next field of beans is a 3-1 enlist bean from Pioneer. When we finished up last time we were in the field, we had an extend flex bean in there, so just want to make sure a majority of these are cleaned out. That way when it's go time, we just load it full of seed and not worry about having the wrong bean in there. It also helps to double check that these are closed. It'd be a very bad day if you started loading seed up top and forgot to close these off and you made a mess down below of all your good seed. Those will feed the pigeons. The rest of my to-do list is stored here in my kangaroo pouch here on my sweatshirt. They're all involving the tractor. 3 out of the 4 things I'm about to do probably should have been done a long time ago. Most likely before this planting season even started, but I never got around to it. First, I need to mount my backup camera. It's been hooked up this whole time, just in a very inconvenient position, laying face down on the floor where I couldn't see it. So I need to mount that somewhere over here. Secondly, and not really that important, is I want to mount my iPad for entertainment purposes. Third, I need to clean the windows in both planter tractors. At this point in the season, you should be on your 2nd or 3rd time cleaning the windows. This will be our first. And last but not least is something I decided to add to the tractor to make my life a little bit easier, and that is one of these steering wheel knobs. This knob mounts on the steering wheel and I can use it as my point of control around the steering wheel in a circle. Before, I was turning with an open hand and pressure against the steering wheel and just turning around. That works perfectly fine, but after I've done it all day, my hand would start to get kind of a rash or very sensitive. I'm gonna put that in to make my life a little bit easier. I guess I could just steer with my finger here on one of the spokes. I want one of those cool knob deals. That's what real farmers have. I'll install that first. In just a short few minutes, I've got all of that done. I don't know why I did not do this at the beginning of the season. It's gonna be really nice having this and the iPad to keep myself entertained. I've been doing perfectly fine without the backup camera. I haven't really traveled down any busy roads though. If you're gonna be on the road for a long time, especially on a road that sees a lot of traffic, having the ability to see behind your planter is a big difference maker. So I'm glad I got that mounted. The picture of Murphy. Very majestic. I don't know if she's just my favorite or the most photogenic animal we have. She does pose well. Okay, now I'm gonna finally clean the windows. I know it was really bothering a few of you that I had not done this yet. As long as I can see out, it's really not that big of a deal. It is nice to have it done though. Got our friend, the good old John Deere Classic Glass Cleaner. Picture perfect. Now we just gotta do the whole thing. I wasn't tall enough, I had to recruit the ladder. Everyone who was bothered by the cleanliness of my windows, you're welcome. I'll see if I can get Jeff to do Dad's tractor. I'm gonna go scout some fields. Our prospects for planting today are looking pretty good. The sun has come out. There's virtually no clouds up here in the sky. The temperature is rapidly approaching t-shirt weather. I think we're gonna be putting more seeds in the ground. I'm headed to go check our fields that we think are gonna plant today. I know without looking though that we have some time to kill, so I'm gonna go ahead and do a little progress update on our first planted field of corn and soybeans. This is the first field of soybeans we planted. It was a little bit over a week ago when they went in the ground. They are a Pioneer 31 A95X. Extend only soybean. Based on the warm and dry weather we had over the last week, I would think that these soybeans are relatively close to breaking through the ground. Soybeans emerge quicker than corn. It's estimated that about 90 growing degree units is all that's required for them to pop out of the ground. I explained growing degree units in a video last spring. I'll go ahead and link it here. Essentially, it's just a unit of heat and how it affects plant growth. Soybeans do not grow based on growing degree units, but it is something that can be used to track things in the earlier cycles of their life. Corn, though, grows entirely based on these growing degree units. The progress of corn in its life cycle can be easily tracked based on cumulative growing degree units. As I said though, if you want to see that, go check out that other video. The emergence of corn and soybeans is obviously going to be much quicker if the soil's warmer. That is much more conducive to growth. I would think that we're getting pretty close to emergence time. Like I said, it's been a week and it was pretty warm. If they're not right below the surface, wow, first dig. Look at that. We got some little ones popping through. Today we have had a cool morning and I think it's going to stay that way for the next week. So their progress will be slow to minimal. That's a good sign though that we have it coming through. Not much of a crust on the ground, so they won't have any problem breaking out. As you see, soybeans have to push up out of the ground. Corn has a spike, and the spike leaf comes straight out of the soil, so it does not struggle as much with that concrete type layer on top. Soybeans unfurl out of the ground. When the ground's really hard in that process, it can actually break its neck and completely kill the plant. That's why it's so important to not plant these around a heavy rain and try and prevent any kind of heavy crust on top of the ground. The seedlings we just looked at were on a lighter part of this field. We're gonna walk to the south end where it's a little bit richer, darker soil, has that solar panel effect. The ground should have been warmer, so theoretically, the soybeans may be closer out of the ground down here. I thought the difference would be a little bit more significant. These seedlings aren't that much farther ahead. Won't be long though, and they'll be out of the ground. Another added factor that helps these soybeans come out of the ground quicker is that we work these corn stalks in the fall. Some people do like to no-till, and there are certain merits and advantages to that system. If you do chop up and redistribute your corn stalks, there'll be less corn residue out there to hold moisture, and you will also expose more soil surface to sunlight. Less moisture, quicker warming, quicker emergence. In my professional opinion, the farther south you go into warmer climates, the easier it is to make no-till systems work. When you get up towards the northern side of the United States and into southern Canada, they deal with a very short growing season. Their soils are very fertile, rich, and dark, so highly productive, but the amount of warm weather they have is limited. Working the ground, as long as it's not highly erodible, can be the big difference maker between getting your crop in and growing, or it could be the difference between being a couple weeks behind planting, then come October, getting an early frost and killing your corn off before it's finished its life cycle. That would hurt yield, so tillage does have a lot of advantages. There's also something to be said about tillage and its effect on weed control. It's hard to argue that tilling your soil doesn't help redistribute those seeds deeper in the ground where they cannot feasibly germinate. Running a deep ripper in our area and mixing all of those water hemp seeds on the top couple inches of the soil down below, that lowers your feasible seed bank pretty significantly. It is something worth considering when you're thinking about tillage. Speaking of weed control, you can see our Residua Pro burn down and soybean residual product is doing its work on this hen bit, starting to die off. Exactly why you apply it. If you don't send a field cultivator out here, these weeds will just keep growing. You gotta spray a burn down. I just found a spot out here that was probably hit twice with the vertical till in the fall. In the process of doing the in-rows, you sometimes work the same spot twice. There's nothing you can do about that. In this area though, I can see the signs of soybeans starting to break through. This crack in the ground is from the soybeans trying to lift out of the ground. I have a fairly good idea that there's going to be a soybean plant under there. Yep, there they are right there, starting their push. Some healthy looking soybeans. 100 bushel average out in this field, just wait. We jumped across the road to a cornfield that was planted at the same time, if not a little bit before those soybeans. If you remember my sweet drone video where we had the bean planter in one field, the sprayer, the corn planter, and 2 field cultivators running, it was all on that same day. So much like those beans over there, these have been in the ground for about a week. Corn is a little bit slower at emerging than soybeans. Add about 30 growing degree units to the amount of time for emergence. That puts us at roughly 120 growing degree units for corn emergence. Obviously, if you planted corn and soybeans in the middle of June when it was 80 or 90 degrees outside, as long as there's enough moisture, they'll pop out of the ground in just a couple of days. Early April, where you're looking at 50, 60, maybe 70 degrees if you're lucky, you're looking at more like a week to 2 weeks depending on conditions. We call this our well farm because our water well's over there on the north end. It's another very rich, productive farm. We're gonna dig in here and take a look to see how far along our corn is. Corn's a little bit harder to find when you dig it up. There's not near as many seeds out here as there is in a bean field. We've yet to find one. There we go. The corn seedling is starting to put up its first seed leaf, going straight towards the surface, and at the same time, it's put about 1.5 inches root down. There's also other roots here emerging out of the seed. It's got a very great start to its life. We'll put him back in there. That way he can grow 300 bushel corn, pack its dirt down. The corn seed has a much easier task. It just has to go straight out of the ground. The seedbed out here is a little bit cloddy. I think other than that visual impairment, it's about perfect. It's nice and soft on top. The seeds will not have much to overcome to get out of the ground. All of this corn ground has been sprayed by Nutrient already. We've got our Acuron out here. There shouldn't be much weed pressure out here unless something goes horribly wrong. We're out scouting a potential field for the corn planter this afternoon. This field is typically a slow drying field, usually one of the last ones we plant. Now we are getting close to the finish line, so it is very fitting that this is still on our list. It is actually rather surprising that it's close to being plantable. If the sun stays out, it may actually go later this afternoon. The reason for it being so much drier than the rest of our fields is we hit it with the field cultivator. When you get far enough ahead of the planter and can start working some of these lighter fields, if a rain does come, it will dry up quicker than if it had not been worked prior to the rain. Obviously, you gain some efficiency by not having to wait on a field cultivator when you want to bring the planter back out. Since the seedbed is weed-free, level, and dry, we'll be able to come out and plant straight into this without having to field cultivate again. The planter won't have any problem on this farm other than trying to go up that hill at 10 miles an hour. I don't think 310 horsepower will pull that 60-foot planter at that speed and at that angle. Not my problem though, I run the bean planter. There are two things you have to be very careful about with getting ahead on your field cultivating. First and foremost, if it did not rain and you had pre-worked all of this ground, by the time you got to it with the planter, it could be completely dry, barren of moisture, and you won't have anything to germinate your seed. That's not the case here because we got a rain. There's plenty of moisture down there. It is something that can happen. It's not very frequent that we go a long time in the spring without a considerable amount of rain. Anything is possible though, and that would be less than ideal. Especially if parts of the field had enough moisture to germinate the crop and other parts didn't, you would have an uneven stand, which would negatively hurt yield. Corn plants like to be in a nice, even environment. That way they don't outcompete each other. The other risk with working it early, and it's not that big of a deal if this does occur, is that if it rains and you can't get back out here for 3 to 4 weeks, these weeds will start to grow again. Then you're left with two choices. Either run the field cultivator again, waste some sweeps, waste some fuel, or you may have to hit it with a burn down on the sprayer to get out here and plant. Again, that is a very unlikely scenario, at least in our neck of the woods, for you not to get back out here in a relatively short time frame and get it planted. For us though, it's gonna work out pretty well that this has been cultivated. I think we'll be out here this afternoon with the corn planter, or I won't. The boss will be. That's above my pay grade. Another thing I should note, this light ground responds very well to field cultivating, especially if it's wet. You hit it with the field cultivator, turn the dirt over, let the air in, it will dry much quicker. Lighter dirt like this farm has a much larger tolerance to iron out in the field than dark soils do. If you field cultivated a richer soil too early, you could cause compaction and damage out there that wouldn't relieve itself for at least a year. We're headed up to God's country to check out the field that I have my sights on for this afternoon with the soybean planter. Fairly certain it's going to be ready. Doesn't hurt to double check. It's pretty much grayed off on top. The only area I'm slightly concerned about are the 2 new terraces we built this winter. I wouldn't be surprised if they're a little wet. Oh, we got a neighbor running a field cultivator over there. Seals the deal. We're planting soybeans out here this afternoon. Time to go hook up to our seed tender. I roll forward a little bit to get the ball to latch. There we go. Safety pin for good measure. Seed tender secured. Let's go over to the planter. A little change of plans. We're not going to put any seed in the seed tender. We're going to go ahead and take the planter on up north to our Pioneer dealer, where he will load the 31 T64 enlist soybeans straight into our tanks out of his seed tender, which is freshly out of his treater. 1, we're doing this for added convenience, and 2, we're trying something special out, which I'll inform you once we get in the field. Let's hit the road. I missed all the beeping. Beep, 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 beep. We're headed north. Chris is guarding the seed tender. It'll be a while before we see the seed tender. We won't be able to completely finish the field without re-topping off our tanks. It's been real nice having my rear view camera hooked up, even though I have not had a single car behind me yet. One of these days it'll be useful. About to cross Route 16, and then we'll be in God's country. We're pulling up to our Pioneer salesman as we speak. That's service right there. So the special thing we're about to try out on our soybean seeds is an additional seed treatment called Alevo. Alevo is a newer technology, though it's been around for a handful of years now. At lower use rates, it offers protection against soybean cyst nematodes. Nematodes, unlike their name sounds to some of you who are not familiar with agriculture, are not toads like you'd see hopping around your yard. They are microscopic organisms that live in the soil and penetrate plant roots, causing damage and infection with other diseases. And at the full seed treatment rate, it offers protection against sudden death syndrome. Sudden death syndrome is a disease that infects plants while they're seedlings, but doesn't show itself till the end of the season. In northern parts of Illinois and other areas, there's a lot more SDS pressure. We do not really see much, if any, but the seed treatment is shown even on low pressure acres to show a 1 to 2 bushel per acre advantage, which theoretically should cover the cost. It is a very premium seed treatment on top of all the other things we already add to our soybean seed. This split planter trial should give us a good idea going forward if it is an economical product to apply. We don't apply anything for nematodes or SDS. We have inoculants, fungicides, growth enhancers. It isn't a product we've used, so I'm excited to see how it does. There's the Alevo there in that tank. Wes and Bruce have a pretty complicated seed treatment system. All of these pumps and lines go into the treater there. Soybeans come down, get mixed around, coated in these products, and they load the tinder. Wes has already loaded his tinder, and he's loading me now, which is why I'm inside wasting time. Pretty neat to see the level of precision that goes into coating your seed with protective stuff. On the road to the field. Thanks for the seed, Bruce and Wes. And it looks like they got their corn plot planted. Always neat to see actual on-farm data. If you count a seed salesman's plot as actual data, that's for you to decide. Need to get those nice and List Pioneer soybeans delivered to our row units. That way we can prime them. To make sure we have good data, I'm splitting the planter on my John Deere mapping system to ensure when come harvest time we know where the Alevo soybeans are and the standard treatment soybeans are. From what Wes told me, the right half of the planter has Alevo, the left half just has our standard treatment. These lines down here are what I have our variety set to. The standard 31T64s on the first 16 and the 31T64s with Alevo on the right side. They're in yellow. Time to plant. Depth check! About 1.5 inches in the ground. Pulling the downfall side should fix it. I'm already running the row units relatively high up in the soil. We'll back her off 40 pounds and go from there. We're gonna do one last depth check. I'm pretty sure I'll like where it's at, then we'll plant the rest of this field. Doesn't hurt to double check, especially with something worth this much money. There's a seed. We're about 1 inch in the ground. We're way into the moisture, probably 1/2 inch to 3/8 of an inch. We've got some loose soil on top. Should be good to go. It's kind of neat how 15 minutes ago, that seed that I just lost out of my hand was in that bulk tank over there. Then it went through the treater, then it was in the seed tender, then it was in the planter, and now it's in the ground, starting its journey of growing season 2021. It's a good farm we got here. I mentioned earlier that these dark soils aren't very forgiving when it comes to tillage. When it comes to seed placement though, that's a completely different story. Especially in soybeans, dark soils are very forgiving to where you put your seeds. They say up here north of Route 16, you can just throw your seeds out on the ground and they'll yield well. I don't know if that's true or not, I'm not gonna try. The neighbors are still working this bean stubble to the west of this farm, and it's coming up about perfectly. It may have been a little bit on the wet side when it got turned over the first time. If you let it aerate a little bit though, it turns into an onion bed. This field has 2 of those property lines where it's extremely nice to have your auto steer line already planned out with your RTK. This is one of them. This neighbor to the south's got some cover crops out. I believe that's rye, and I'm assuming he's already planted soybeans into that. A really neat idea. I know a lot of people have tried out rye ahead of soybeans. It's supposed to add organic matter to the soil, improve the quality of the soil, and reduce weed pressure. Definitely something to consider going forward, especially if you're into more green, renewable, regenerative types of farming, if you like those words. It doesn't help over there where someone ran the vertical till over on his rye, not realizing where the property line was. And no, it was not me who did that. Another day, another row unit giving us grief. 11's at 123,000 seeds per acre. We're shooting for 160K. So it's almost 20% off of where it should be. We're gonna have to go take a look. There's row 11. Make sure it has seed. Full of seed. If there's an ample amount of seed in the row unit that means it's not having delivery problems, my first thing I always do is clean out the seed tube, which cleans the seed sensor. It could just be missing the seeds coming out. We'll give that a shot. Let's hope that that fixes it, because if not, further steps of troubleshooting can be a lot more difficult than our other problems. If the sensor down there just got dirty, it may not be seeing all the seeds come through the tube. So far, so good. We're putting 153,000 down on row number 11. Could have just been that sensor. I just finished the inrows of this field, and I've planted almost 16 acres. When you get into these big fields, there's a lot of rows on the outside. Okay, check it out. Woo. That was so much easier. Here's our GPS mapping of the two different sides of the planter, the side with the Olivo and the side without. Splitting the planter is a great way to test out a product across a large amount of ground. Individual strip tiles have their place for certain products. For something like this though, if you want very good, accurate, reliable, repetitive data, you need to have it across a large amount of acres, and you want all of your samples to be relatively comparable. If I were to plant a strip of Olivo here and a strip of Olivo down on the west end of the field, sure, that'd give you an idea compared to the rest of it. It's not that great of a comparison though. Versus splitting the planter all the way across the field, we have the two products side by side. It isn't terribly expensive to try out, and when we process our data after harvest, we will have a very accurate idea of how this product performs. Repetition is key to having quality data. Quality data is key to making great financial decisions. If we planted those two strips out here, like I said, and they showed a very good return, and we planted our whole farm in it next year, and it didn't make any return at all, it could just be bad luck, or the data we used to make our decision was not as accurate as it could have been. Because the cost of putting a crop in the ground is so high, farmers are typically very hesitant to dive headfirst into new technology and products without very good data to make that decision. That's why you'll see them sprinkle out new products here and there to get a grasp of how they perform on their farm. If they were to put something across their whole farm and it did not perform, they very well could be losing out on thousands and thousands of dollars because of that decision. Of course, the companies that make the product, the seeds, all the things that go out on the farm, do their own trials. When it's the person making the money off of the sale of the product, you do want to take that with a grain of salt. Always run your own little infield tests if you can. About to plant through our new terraces for the first time. Hopefully I don't bury the tractor. It looks a little chunky over there. The process of digging these up with bulldozers, moving the dirt around, makes the soil a little bit rough for a few years. I won't be surprised if there's not a yield drag in this area. We also may have a little bit of a soup hole for a while. I'm going to try and go through it. I don't know how this is going to go. We're going to find out. I was expecting something a lot worse, but that was no problem at all. Dinosaur egg. Unfortunately, it was big enough that I couldn't leave it out here. Guess he's going for a ride. Ride's over. I've already coordinated one of our inlets on these new terraces. As is tradition, it's like sending a boat out to sea. Got to make sure you do it right. It's a tad bit muddy down here. It's a little different type of inlet than we normally use. Supposed to be a high flow. When the terrace fills very high with water, it comes over these side holes on the inlets, gets a straight shot in. We don't have any like that. Well, there's our problem right there. We got an old clay bubbling, I bet. Nothing you can do. You build these terraces, dig them out shallow. There's no way of telling what tiles are already here. Just a casualty of war. Wow, we're getting in multiple places. It's bubbling up there. It's bubbling up there. Really bad. I may have just done that. And it's also bubbling up right here. I doubt these beans will grow. So at the end of fall this year, we put in these two L-shaped terraces. There's one right here, it goes that way, and there's another one that parallels it just 60 foot on the other side. These act as a dam, so to speak. They stop the water from following grade down to where it wants to drain. We've had a very bad wash through there for decades at this point. It's already started to fill in a little bit. These terraces should help prevent that. The water pools in them and then slowly drains out the tile. It goes to the same place down there on the other side of the field. It just takes a different type of route. Poor guy. A little bit muddy. It should just fall out when I start planting again. Want to make sure I didn't mangle any part of the planter. Sometimes you got to get a little messy. This is what it looks like when one of your gauge wheels is packed full of mud and won't turn. Well, we got the planter unplugged. There was a lot more mud in there than I had realized. And unfortunately, at the same time, the boss was showing up with the seed tender and he drove out here, and needless to say, he was disgruntled. Not my fault it's wet. It's my job to plant. On the bright side, Lenny and Allie are here. Hey, Lenny. Nice focused. Lenny! Lenny, Lenny, Lenny! That's a wildly inconvenient place to park the seed tender. Gotta back it around. Well, that took a little bit more effort than I like to give. It looks like we're about to conclude our Alivo trial. What's left in the seed tender is just our standard treatment. I'll split it between both tanks and that should be enough to finish the field. Well, we gotta walk to the seed tender. I think this 150 feet may be the death of me. Let's see if we can get this right. Should be good. Super. We have just shy of 2,000 pounds on the seed tender. You see our gross right there. I'm gonna split that in half. Comes out to about 880, 890-ish. We'll put 880 on both sides. Should finish the field. Did Hulk Hogan tie this on? Jeez. I should have known better and ran the seed tender empty before I put it in here. There's some Extendflex beans and a rock in there. Huh. I may be better off just dumping that. Did I get the rocks out? No, there's one. Did I say 880? I meant 980. I promise you I can do math. It's kind of chilly out here with this wind. I'm sure you can hear it. We need to remember to change our documentation. Oh no. I accidentally moved my auto steer line. Hopefully I put it back where it was. We need to take off the Alivo variety I made and put the whole thing just on 31 T64Es. It looks like I did that. All 32, good to go. Do a little test fire here to make sure that we're on the right row. I fat-fingered the wrong button and moved my auto steer line. Oh gosh, you guys got talc on the lens. You can't even see me. If my math's right, and I guess fate is on my side, we shouldn't have any problems between here and the end of the field. Hopefully we end the night with some smooth, easy planting. We've only got a through and a half left in this field, and it's quitting time. Oh, hopefully we don't have to worry about that. Oh, I'm ready to be done bouncing. Oh boy, first unit's out of seed. We're not even done yet. I'm going to use a different strategy than I normally do. Instead of going back there and moving the seed around, I know I have more on the left side. I'm gonna come back over this, turn off my section control, and just plant over the side that wasn't planting enough. Should work perfect. I'm about done. Oh, there we go. Saw 1 for 32 there a second ago. Pretty much empty. I noticed something peculiar out here in the field probably 5 or 6 rounds ago. I was like, what in the world is this white object? Look who tried to make a run for it off the back of the planter. I knew something was missing up there. We talked about this. All right, that was a little bit dramatic. I do need to keep this bucket though. It's an absolutely beautiful evening here in central Illinois, a tad bit on the chilly side. We've got all of our dry ground planted at this point. We're gonna fold the planter up, take it home, call it a night. Alright everyone, I'm topping off the planter tractor and then we're shutting down for the evening. We knocked out one of our better fields. I guess the corn planter actually did not end up planting anything. We will see what tomorrow brings in terms of ground conditions. The problem that we're running into now is that the temperatures are a little bit cooler during the day, 50 to 60 degrees, and the majority of our ground that we have left is lighter and slower drying. Without warm weather, we may be waiting longer than we would like to plant it, but we'll just have to see what cards we're dealt. I hope that this episode was entertaining and possibly taught you a thing or two about farming that you didn't already know. Like the video if you enjoyed it, subscribe if you want to see more, and comment down below if you have any questions. You know I love to talk about farming. Have a great day, everyone. Peace! Different.